chart types to use for the different data sets. There's absolutely lots of options. So I'm not going to go through absolutely every single thing, but hopefully it will be enough for you to understand how to choose the right chart type for the data sets that you have and the stories and the messages that you want to convey in your Flourish visuals. So we're going to cover this list of different data types or different relationships that you want to show in your data in this session. So change over time, size or magnitudes, part to whole relationships, correlation, distribution, ranking, flows, and relationships. The main thing that I always say to everyone, where do you start? The first question that you should always ask yourself is, what am I trying to communicate with my data? What am I trying to tell people? What's the relationship that I'm trying to show people? And this will help narrow down the number of options you have for the different chart types. So if you want to use a change over time, or if you want to show someone a ranking of something, or a correlation between different variables, all these kind of narrowing it down to these sorts of things means that your options are much clearer on what you should use, and it kind of gets rid of some of the other options. And one resource that I would thoroughly recommend is the Financial Times's visual vocabulary from their data viz and journalism team. It's a very thorough record of all the different chart types and what chart type to use for what specific data set or story you want to tell. And the categories I mentioned earlier, like change over time and correlation, ranking, are all the names that they have used as well. So we're trying to be consistent with that. So I would thoroughly recommend a browse of this, and the link will be in the slides that we post afterwards, so you can have a look. So change over time, I'm going to switch it now into my Flourish story, which has all these examples in. I'm going to get rid of this thing here. So I won't be in the editor much today, showing you the options for how to do these different things. I will be giving more, it will be more examples in the Flourish story slides to show you how to kind of choose different chart types. But again, we will share our slides afterwards, and this will have links to the blueprints for all these different chart types and help docs on the different options that you can select in the Flourish editor. Again, if you have a pressing question whilst I'm going through it and want to see how to do something, just post it in the chat, and we can hopefully go into more detail on any of those particular Flourish editor questions. So to start with, comparison over time. So this is when you have what we call time series data. So there's a set of dates in them, years or months. Very common data set. I'm sure most people will be familiar with data that has dates and times in it. And the standard way to show a change over time is a line chart. It's a great basic chart type that's used for lots of things, and you'll be very familiar with. And the reason why it's so good is because it's very simple and very easy to understand how a series changes over time. So I have tried to use the same data set or examples for all these slides and the examples I show, so you can see how the data changes, or the story that you want to tell from the data changes on a common set of data, and how that will lead you to make different chart type choices depending on what part of the data you want to use or what message you want to communicate to your reader. So this data set is UK trade, so it's all the UK's trade with other countries. So this is the first example line chart, just showing how the UK trades with different groups or categories of countries, so the rest of the world total EU and United States over time. That's your basic line chart. But area charts are also a good way to show change over time. And again, this is an area chart as an option in the Flourish line bar pie template. And so you can change from a line to a bar, a line to an area chart very easily on a click of a button. And this is an unstacked area chart, so it's basically exactly the same as the line chart, but with the areas coloured in below the line. And this colouring in effect helps the reader see the relative sizes and how they're changing over time. So this can be a nice kind of extra visual effect that you have with an area chart. Alternatively, you can also have a stacked area chart. So this is showing that same change over time, but them stacked on top of each other. So you can see the how total UK trade has changed over time, and the composition or the component parts of the change over time. So stacked area charts are not only a good way of showing a change over time, they're also a good way of showing a part to whole relationship, and how something is composed, how its segments that it's composed of. And we will touch on more part to whole chart types later on in this session. Column charts are also a way of showing change over time, similar to line, but a bar for each date. Or a column for each date, but this is normally much better for a single series. So here I've just got the EU in there. If you can add multiple series onto a column chart as extra bars, which I've done here with those other two series, so the rest of the world and the United States. But as you tend to add series to column charts, they do get quite cluttered, and it makes it harder to see patterns in the individual series. So this is definitely something to think about in your choice of chart type. It can look much better and easier to understand if you split these bars out to a grid. Again, this is a click of a button in the Flourish editor line bar pie template, where you can split it out into a grid of charts, and then you can see the change over time and the relative magnitudes for the different series. So another alternative to the classic line and bar charts that I've just been showing you for change over time is slope. It's a slope chart, and this is really handy if you want to show the change over a couple of time points, so a beginning and an end point. So here we're showing the difference between 1999 and 2009, and we're helping reduce kind of the noise in the middle for the dates in the middle of the time series by just focusing on these two time points. And so this could be a consideration if there's a lot going on in between that's distracting your reader from your main message, which is the change between these 2 points. And again, slope charts can be very good for showing ranking data. So we will go on to ranking a bit later on with some other options. And also just to show you, in a slope chart, it doesn't necessarily have to be a beginning point. You can have dates in the middle, and then you can start to see that this kind of change. It was a more gradual slope in the first 10 years compared to the second 10 years. And this can be a nice thing to show that kind of UK trade escalated with these other partners in this last 10 years. And you can add as many interim dates as you want, but obviously the more you add, the closer you are becoming to it just being a line chart. So that's how a slope chart compares to just a normal line chart. Okay, so on to our second category, which is trying to portray size or magnitude of things. So normally we use column charts as a way of showing absolute or relative size of categorical data. So here we now have countries below, that's our categorical data, but just for 1 year. and we can compare the relative magnitudes of UK trade with these different countries, and the height of the bars helps us make a comparison. And also it's a much better idea to sort column charts. And then this kind of speaks to also using them for ranking, so ordering and of data from highest to lowest, because it's just much easier for someone to see a pattern when it's ordered in some kind of rational way. You can also turn column charts easily into bar charts. Again, another good way of looking at size and magnitude, but it can be helpful if you've got long labels which don't fit so well on a column chart, and you can then read your bar charts downwards, so vertically. And again, as before, you can add multiple series to your column and bar charts when you want to compare different metrics on the same scale. As before, it can make it harder to see changes in the individual series. So you could do a grid of charts, which is what I showed you before, or you can use an alternative type of bar chart. Here it's kind of showing a distribution of the different metrics, exports and imports, on a kind of a negative and positive scale. So here you get a better idea that UK are importing much more to European countries than they're exporting. And thinking about it in a kind of more of a distribution way makes you see the patterns across countries more easily. Or alternatively, you could just think about using a different metric that tells the story without having to plot multiple series. So here, instead of plotting both exports and imports, I'm just plotting net trade, which is the difference between them. And this might tell a completely different story, where actually your net trade is greatest with Ireland and Germany. You're actually importing much more than you're exporting. So this is just a reminder to always think about the metrics that you're using. Are they backing up the story you're trying to tell, and then choosing the right chart type to display this information? Okay, so that was a whistle-top tour through size and magnitude. On to our next area, which is parts of a whole. And in Flourish, we call this hierarchy, and you will be using our hierarchy template to look at most of the examples here. Apart from the first one. So the first example is what I call a donut chart, or what lots of people call a donut chart, which is basically a pie chart but with a hole in the middle, and is normally preferred to a pie chart because it's hard to read angles when this is drawn all the way into the middle, and it also gives you some space in the middle of your chart if you want to put some kind of extra number or information. But they're both exactly the same thing, and donut and pie charts are both in the line bar pie template, and you can switch between them as options to check out which one portrays your information in the best way. So this here you can see you don't get a kind of idea of the total size of UK trade, but you get a much better idea of how it's split. So that's this part to whole relationship, so all UK trade and how it's split between these three groups of trading partners. And then kind of one step on for a donut chart is what we call a sunburst chart, which is basically a donut with another layer. And you can have multiple layers for, as you kind of keep breaking down the composition of each part of the split. This is just a way, this is again a part to whole relationship, but getting broken down further and further into underlying categories. And it's very easy to do sunburst charts in Flourish in our hierarchy template, as I explained before. So now you can see Germany makes up the highest amount of EU trade that the UK does, and China the highest amount of trade with the rest of the world. If you want to play around with the other forms of hierarchical or part-to-whole presentation, you can click through the different options in our hierarchy template to show a tree map option. So, so here, this is a tree map. Sorry, it's changed. Yes, sorry. Tree map. So this is a tree map. Again, it's very similar to the sunburst, but it's just more. It's in a square format rather than a circular format, and it's breaking down the whole segment categories down into their component countries. And you have different options within tree map about how you want to arrange things. So here, instead of having the squares kind of laid out in a horizontal way, we're laying them out vertically, and this helps maintain the height for each of these segments: EU, rest of the world, and United States, making it easier to compare the different groups, because the height is not changing of these kind of aggregated groups. And this tree map layout makes it is very similar to having a percentage of a total stacked bar or column chart. So it's kind of on the same premise of having this kind of proportion of a whole. And a last option in our hierarchy template is changing it to a pat circle layout. And this, it looks nice. It can be a good space saver, but also just to be mindful that people do find it harder to compare areas of circles than they do of squares that you see in the tree map. So that is part to whole data relationships. Next up, correlation. I'm going to take a momentary pause for a sip of tea. So the standard way to show correlation between two numerical variables is a scatter chart, and we have the scatter template in Flourish. So here we are using a numerical value on both axes, the y-axis and the x-axis, imports and exports, not a category like we were in size and magnitude, or not as time dimension like we were in change over time. And this is so we can see how these two variables are related to each other. We can add trend lines, which help show how related they are. So all these three groups are positively related. So as imports go up, exports tend to go up, or vice versa. So they're positively correlated because the line is going upwards. But you can add trend lines for each category to see how that relationship is different when it's broken down into these different categories. And here you can see that the relationship is slightly different for the United States. So because it is below what we call the 45-degree line, which is where the number of imports will be equal to the number of exports, this means that we have positive net trade with the US. So we export more than we import to the US, which is different to the other two categories. So trend lines can be helpful for highlighting these kind of differences in metrics and the different relationships between the metrics. And you can also show how these numerical relationships change over time by connecting the dots, which each represent a year, with a line. And so this is kind of a line chart, change over time, scatter, mashup. And you might be familiar with it also being called the Hans Rosling chart, who kind of famously developed this to tell a story about how life expectancy and GDP changed across the world over time. Again, all these things are options in the scatter template to be able to add the lines and the trend lines that you've just seen. So moving on from scatter to distribution. which can also all be done with options in the scatter template. So you can make dot plots out of the scatter template, which show how the kind of raw data values are distributed across categories. Here you can see that the distribution of US trade is kind of very different to the other two groups. It's much more positive. So this is what I was referring to before. Our net trade is positive, so we export more to the US than we import, and it also has a wider range of values over time, so it's more distributed, so it's changed more over time than the rest of the world and the EU. And one step on from a dot plot is what we call a box plot. Again, another option in the scatter template, where a box will be plotted over your distribution to help you see where the median value is and the inter and outer quartile ranges of your distribution of raw values. So here, this just reinforces what we said. The median value is for the US is much higher than the median values for the other two groups, and the range is much greater, both the interquartile range and the outer range. So this is just a way of solidifying what we could see in the dot plot with some actual kind of numerical visual parameters. Again, this is all available in our scatter template as options. So ranking, again, we've got a couple, I'm just going to rattle through this. So ranking, ranking we've already touched on a little bit with the sorting of bars, the order of bar charts over categories, and the slope chart. But Flourish has some really novel and fun and engaging templates for playing through how ranks change over time. So I thought this is a nice place to bring this. So playing how a country's rank changes over time. You can easily transfer between scores and ranks. So if you wanted the actual number, or if you just wanted to see the rank of the country and how that had changed its trade with the UK over time. And another nice template that we have is the racing bar chart, which is very similar to the line chart. Again, playing rank of countries through time and seeing how the different countries rank for UK trade. Again, this is just another option with a lot more kind of movement and animation to help people see how rank changes. So the last kind of data area I'm going to touch on is flows and relationships, and these can start to get quite complicated. So don't worry if it all seems quite confusing. We have great templates for this with blueprints where you can understand what your data has to look like to use this kind of chart type. So the first one is a Sankey chart. So this shows the flows between two or more states. So you could add another step in, a bit like the slope chart. This is showing, this particular example is showing export trade volumes between two countries. And you can see the total amount to the US by all its component countries. And it's nice, you can kind of hover on the different elements to see where they flow to, and then interact in this interactive Sankey. You also have the chord template in Flourish, where it's very similar to the Sankey, but it's circular, so it takes up less space, but you are only limited to, let's put this in, to two ways of showing, or to only showing the flows between two things. So the UK with all the component countries. Lastly, in flows and relationships, network charts are kind of a very advanced chart type for showing multiple relationships between many data points. So we call these nodes, the relationship between these different countries, and the placement of these nodes are dictated by the strength of these links, so these trade flows. So by the kind of strength of the link, so how much trade is going on, and the connectedness, so how many countries is each country connected to through its trades. And this can also be referred to as a kind of link node diagram. But Flourish has a network chart template where you can very easily create network charts, as long as you have your information. Again, I should have mentioned, for all this section, you just need a source and a target category, so that for all these different types of chart, because you need the end and the beginning state to know how the different nodes or component parts are linked. But these can look pretty cool, and you can drag them around as well, which is quite nice, so you can start to see how the different countries are linked. And you can see whether things are linked less or more by clicking on them. So that has concluded all my examples. I haven't touched on geospatial chart types, which is all to do with location and maps, because we have already done a couple of webinars on maps. So if I just take you back to the static slides, we already have an overview of the maps and a projection map, and basics and advanced webinar, so you get a much more thorough explanation of all our map templates and where to use them. But the emphasis is on it should be when there's locational patterns. And again, in our static slides, we have examples. Here's the link to all the examples that I've just been showing you, and a link to all our resources, our help docs, our blogs, and a specific blog on choosing the right visualization for your data here, which has links to all the blueprints for these different chart types. So I hope that was helpful for you all. It's a lot of information to take in a very short period of time, so all these resources will be posted for you, so you can take more time to go through it. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at Priority Support. Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you at the next session in 2 weeks' time.